Welcome everyone, Costin here on Serious Gaming. What to make of Battlefield 5, the open beta? Well, I would certainly say from the very beginning of this video that first impressions do matter for any particular title. And first impressions for Battlefield 5, when we're talking here about trailers, were not very great to begin with. So people came into this with many people came into this with not such a positive mindset to the title, because let's face it, the first trailer, the reveal trailer of the game, was frankly garbage. And I'm not talking here about people getting frustrated over the social justice warriorism employed by EA and DICE over, you know, female character fight, the British female character fighting in World War II on the front lines, which didn't happen, or very rarely happened. But hey, let's throw that in the reveal trailer of the game, because apparently that's what matters to our fan base. No, it fucking doesn't. There's a lot of people that don't honestly give a damn, especially shooter players that don't give a damn. But hey, political activism at its finest. But beyond that, the trailer just was complete garbage, really. I mean, it's a mess of things, chaotic mess of things that you don't really, you know, your brain doesn't really have time to process. Just throwing shit at the screen in a fast sequence does not make for a good trailer, EA. But this is exactly what they did. And I remember a comment from someone in response to the complaints of female characters, and that is like, this is World War II, in which captures perfectly how bad that trailer was. And if you think a reveal trailer does not matter to the success of the game or the impressions people will have of the game before it's even launched, just ask Call of Duty how their reveal trailer went down for them. I mean, this is not on the same scale, to be clear. Call of Duty's trailer for Infinite Warfare was much worse than this. And honestly, Call of Duty, that particular Call of Duty was actually a relatively decent game, specifically when it came to the single player. But because of those first impressions, because of that first trailer, people had a very negative attitude towards the title before it even launched. And I feel that this is the case as well with Battlefield 5. Because honestly, when you're playing the game, and I've been playing this for quite a few hours in the open beta, but when you're playing the game, you don't really care or really notice all that much that there's female characters. Now, to be fair, this is probably in part because they only have one soldier being a female character, and that's the British Recon. The Germans have none, and the other classes on the British side don't have female characters. You can't customize your character, but I imagine even with customization, you won't see that many, or it won't be that noticeable. I mean, you certainly won't be able to tell things by looking at them because you're focused on other stuff. Voice-wise, you know, you're mostly going to be able to tell this either by the squad screen at the end of each game, which tells you which squad performed the best, or through their sound. But really, does that matter? Is that really a big deal? No. Should have been such a big deal in the trailer? No. They could have had it, you know, the way they did it in Devastation or Rotterdam, or the multiplayer trailer where it's just there, but focused on it? Bit ridiculous. Mind you, when it comes to World War II, historically speaking, it played a significant role in the women's rights movement, because women did play such a significant role in the war, though not on the front lines of the war, but they did play one as spies, as code breakers, logistical support, anti-aircraft crews for the British. Or if you're looking at the Soviets, yes, the Soviets did use female ground troops, which is something that's been ignored by history, but not the British. The British didn't use them. I mean, French resistance fighters, all that. You know, plenty of roles that women did play in World War II that did have a fairly significant impact, especially in Western countries, when it came to the women's rights movement in the aftermath of the war. Now, that had been obviously going on before the war, had been going on for years, decades even, but it really gained new steam in the aftermath of the war, and the pivotal role that women played during said war. So that's something worth mentioning over there. But I feel the problem with a lot of video games is that they ignore a lot of the aspects, especially shooters. They ignore a lot of the things that went down behind the scenes, so to speak. The logistical support, the spies, the code breakers, all this stuff, right? It's just like the frontline shooting. Yeah, but that's not how war works. Especially in World War II wars, or even hell, World War I, or even long before that. Because supply line, logistical support, etc., all that has been playing a major role in wars long actually before long before World War One even. And yet this is something that apparently that game developers don't really care about to represent all that well in their titles. But hey, we need to have female soldiers because equality. And yeah, that doesn't work very well. Speaking about the World War II aspect about this, and this is the same problem that Battlefield 1 has when it comes to World War 1, representing World War 1, that less so than Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, is that it doesn't really feel like World War II. I mean, I've played plenty of World War II titles. I've read a lot, researched quite a bit on World War II. This doesn't really feel like World War II. One of the issues is that you have advanced weaponry, infantry, tanks, planes that were used late during the war, though some of them in limited quantities, but you still have a lot of this weaponry being used in battles like Rotterdam and Narvik, which took place earlier in the war, the invasion of Norway, the invasion of the Netherlands. And mind you had Norwegian troops fighting the Germans in Narvik with support of the British. You had the Dutch alone fighting the Germans at Rotterdam. There was an actual battle, even though most people remember Rotterdam for the bombing. But still, you have these battles earlier on in the war, far earlier in the war, with weaponry that was used towards the very end of the war. I mean, it's ridiculous to have Tiger tanks roaming in fucking Rotterdam. It is plainly ridiculous. It just takes you out of the moment completely. Things like that do take you out of the moment that this is a World War II game. Because at the end of the day, it's not really a World War II game. It's not fought how World War II was fought. Not in its weaponry, not really. Even though they do have some of the weapons used in World War II. They weren't used like this, not in these kind of quantities, and certainly urban warfare, in the case of Rotterdam in World War II, was certainly not the way that this game portrays it. Because at the end of the day, Battlefield 5, like Battlefield 1, like Battlefield 4, are more or less reskins of Battlefield 3. No problem with that. To be clear, Battlefield 3 is a great game. I've spent countless hours playing it, but because you do have this setting, there are certain expectations with this setting that are simply not met by the developer. Now, if EA just wants to continue making clones of Battlefield 3, which was a highly successful game, that's all very well and good. I just kind of wish that they would actually make a good World War II game instead of the nonsense that they're currently working on. We'll have to see how all of this plays out. Did I enjoy my time with it? I mean, at the end of the day, Battlefield 3 is an enjoyable game, but yeah, I did. Is it worth buying? I mean, if you're like me and you've spent countless hours in Battlefield 3, then there's not that much incentive to actually bother with this game. I've had the same problem with Battlefield 4, to an extent with Battlefield 1, and the Battlefront games actually, because they too are also very similar to this. I've had this problem. Sure, there are improvements, tweaks, all that kind of stuff, but at the end, the core gameplay is the one that we've had for several years now, with relatively few significant changes being made to it. Just the setting is being changed. The weapons are changed, though they feel the same, very much the same as weapons in other titles. So make of that what you will. Battlefield 1 had plenty of these same issues. Of course, what helped Battlefield 1 is that we never really had a big budget developed World War 1 game, even though it didn't really feel like World War 1, even though it had plenty of its own issues as well. But still, that helped Battlefield 1. With Battlefield 5, we've had plenty of World War 2 games. Good ones at that. Games that people have enjoyed, games that people have sunk countless hours into. And it's just not good enough. It's really not fun enough. And there's a significant outcry from a lot of people when it comes to this title. I would say that, like most other EA titles recently, it runs well, it looks good. I have an i7-3770K CPU, which is fairly old, and a GTX 980, so I don't have the top-of-the-line computer, especially when it comes to my CPU, that is fairly outdated at this point. But I was still able to play this game mostly on the ultra settings, at 1080p, close to 60 FPS. I did have to turn some options down from ultra to high in order to get that, just a couple of them, but most of the options I did play this game mostly on Ultra. So it runs well. It looks good as well. I especially like the fact that your clothing can actually be, you know, the snow affects your clothing as a particular example. That, you know, the dirt, the grime, all of that stuff plays a role graphically, which you don't see in a lot of other titles. So it's interesting to see what they're doing graphically with this game, though. Having a good-looking EA game is kind of par for the course at this particular time. So am I impressed by it? To an extent, there are some things that I really do like, but impressed? Not really. I mean, there are other titles that I've been impressed by, but not necessarily this one. The one feature I do really like is the fortification aspect, that you have a tool, everyone has a tool, and they can use that to build fortifications in places like, say, you know, a bridge is destroyed, you can rebuild that bridge, or you can put sandbags at strategic points to make it easier to defend a particular point, or you can, if a house is destroyed, you can still make use of that by using the fortification options available to you as a player. So that's very interesting. That's all very well and good. So kudos to them for that particular feature. I do think it adds something to the game, but just not enough to make up for the other issues that this particular title has. Now, classes wise, you've got Assault, Medic, Support, and Recon, which function much the same way as you'd expect, though they have made some changes to healing, changes to the spotting system. So you have binoculars as Recon, you have to use that, and if a target moves out of line of sight, you will lose your spot on them. So changes that it's less useful, but that means you actually have to pay attention on your own. You can't just look at a marker on your map or a marker or marker in front of you to see where the enemy is. You actually have to spot them yourself, which can be fairly tricky, though obviously that's far more realistic to how things actually do go in terms of, or how things actually did go in terms of World War II battles. So that's a welcome change. Limited ammo, HP regeneration limited to an extent as well, though you can find ammo packs and health kits at control points now. And the classes, though, overall functioning much the same way as you'd expect. It's similar to Battlefield 1 in that the Assault has an anti-tank weapon, Support has the ability, obviously, to give people ammo, Medic heals people, revives people, so you have the revive kit. It's not a gadget anymore that you can choose, it's something that you do use, you do have by default, and you can use it on anyone by default, though they've made it a bit more tricky than it used to be. So some changes here and there, arguably the most significant one obviously being with ammo and health and how they work. Anyway, Costin here on Serious Gaming signing out. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Would I recommend playing this game? Probably. If you've enjoyed previous games, just it kind of gets dull after a while playing more or less the same game that we've been playing for years now with no real significant changes. Some changes here and there, but not significant enough to change the overall formula that we've been dealing with. So stay tuned for more. If you like my content, please do consider supporting me via PayPal or Patreon so I can continue making videos on YouTube.